The darkness hides a hunter. The life of ants. The world of beetles. Spiders, hunters, and mothers. Crawling creatures. The forest floor. Life cycle of a butterfly. The world of spiders. Diverse inhabitants. The industrious ants. The world of spiders. scorpion's life. Beetles and herbivores. Predators and prey. The cycle of life. The world of spiders. Crawlers and larvae. Diverse forest insects. Struggle for survival. Life of spiders. Busy wasps and bees. At work. Beetles and grasshoppers. Aquatic and other insects. Insect life cycle. The busy world of ants. Crawlers and critters. The patient hunters, spiders. Forest flora and fauna. The world of spiders. The industrious ants. Masters of camouflage. Life cycles and growth. Aquatic and ground dwellers. Forest curiosities. The beginning of life. Larval stage. Busy workers. Beetles and bugs. Winged wonders. The lush environment. Gentle foragers. The hunters and hunted. Circle of life. Life on the ground. The world of spiders. Flying and hopping insects. Life cycles and survival. Forest ambience. Ground dwellers. The hunters. Nocturnal glow.